Welcome to admins.com in our lab video series on Cisco Software Defined Access. This is Metha, your instructor for this video series. For a complete list of our SDA videos, you can visit our website under the Routing Switching section. There you can also sign up for our newsletters to receive the latest video updates. In our last video, we went over the fundamental concepts of Cisco SDA and its components. If you have not realized already, the DNA Center is one of the main components and you can't really do much without a DNAC up and running. So in our first configuration video, we will be going through the steps to install a cluster of DNAC. Everything begins with the physical connections. We have already gone over available interfaces on the DNA Center appliances and their usage in the last video. We said that Cisco recommends using one 10 gig port for data and the other 10 gig for cluster, and also configure a 1 gig out-of-band management. But here we are going to combine the data in the cluster to a single 10 gig just because it's just a lab. And if you look at the diagram right here, we have all of our 3 DNAC appliances connected to VLAN 32, which is going to be our primary server VLAN, and these are their corresponding IP addresses: 172.168.111 for DNAC1, 112 for DNAC2, and 113 is for DNAC3. Since these are 10 gig ports, we have a 10 gig switch, switch 2, that used just to provide the 10 gig access. Switch 2 is then uplinked to a switch 1, which is our main switch, and that's also where all of the SVIs are located, as well as the out-of-band management subnet. And out-of-band management is VLAN 99 with the subnet 172.168.99.0. And each DNAC has its out-of-band management interface as well as CIMC interface connected to this out-of-band management VLAN 99. And these are their corresponding IP. All right, so 99.111, 112, 113 for the out-of-band management IPs, and 121, 122, and 123 for their CIMCs. Since these are just 1 gig copper port, it goes directly to switch 1. On the same VLAN 32, we have other servers running on that subnet, and these are our Windows 2012 domain controller, DNS, and certificate authority that we'll use later in the future lab at the IP of 32.40. And just FYI, although it doesn't really matter right now, we have an iServer running on that same VLAN at the IP of 32.102. And the switch 1 loopback 0 is 172.16.0.10. And like I said, there will be our primary switch, obviously outside of the fabric. As a prerequisite to DNAC appliance installation, you obviously need to be in possession of either 1 or 3 DNAC appliances, right? 1 for the standalone deployment and 3 for a redundant cluster. Here we have 3 appliances. All right, then you need to obtain a DNAC ISO image of the version that you would like to install from cisco.com, and here we are going to install the current latest version, which is 1.1.4. Right, you need to make sure that you have the network parameters ready, and these are some of the things that you will need during the installation. Going from top to bottom, we have IP addresses, a minimum of 2 up to 4, depending on how many interfaces you will be using. 2 are the minimum, and that's basically the IP for the 10 gig interface and CIMC. If you add the out-of-band management interface as well as using a separate cluster link or dedicated cluster link, then you will need 2 additional IP, and that takes it up to 4. For a cluster, you're going to need a virtual IP. For us, it's going to be .110, right, which is the first IP of 111, 112, 113. The VIP will be 110. You need to have a DNS server available. For us, is our Win 2012 domain controller, the IP .40. Right? Then you will need 2 subnet at the minimum size of /21, and that's going to be the 2 subnets we're going to use for the service subnet and the cluster service. And lastly, you need an NTP IP address. All right, we're going to be using switch 1 for that. You can see it's point to the loopback. Although now that I think about it, I might change my mind and point the NTP to the Win 2012 instead, because when we add the switched 1 to DNAC, that NTP information might change, which might mess up our whole NTP config. Right, and the last item on the prerequisites to make sure that CIMC has already been configured like we have here, and it's also accessible and you're able to log into it. And because that's how we are going to perform the server installation. So what's going to happen now is we're going to go through one server at a time and perform the installation in sequence. We're not going to do them in parallel. I mean, the first one has to be at least up and running before you can add additional node, but Cisco recommend you to do them in order and not doing node 2 and 3 concurrently. So we're going to go 1, 2, and then 3. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and RDP to our jump box, and in this case is our Windows 2012, and that's how we are going to access our CIMC. And bring up RDP session. We already have here the login page to CIMC of LM-DNAC number 1, the IP of 99.121, right there. Go ahead and log in. Looks like it comes with the CIMC version 3.x, which is the newer version right now. And if you're familiar with the previous version 2.x, you can see that there's a change to the web GUI. Quite significantly, in fact. So if you log in, you'll see that it looks a little different in terms of appearance, but the content's pretty much the same. You still get the server information, the host names, MAC address, firmware version, and then the chassis status. All right, then we need to console to the KVM by clicking Launch KVM right here, and you'll be presented with two options, either Java-based or HTML. Right, for some of you who has shared maybe similar experience as I did that have a lot of issue with the Java, then in this later version of CIMC, you have an option to pick HTML now, so you don't have to worry about your Java version not being compatible and getting those security warning that prevents you from accessing the KVM. Right, so we're going to pick HTML and click on the link. Currently, our servers are powered down, right, so we need to power that up. Let me show you where that image is located. We have a folder called SDA, and we have already downloaded DNAC software 114 right here, about 14 gig, and that's going to be the image that we use to install this thing. All right, so if the DNAC already comes with the version you want, although not sure how you can tell, as it doesn't really show anywhere other than on the hardware order you might have. But if that's the case, then you can skip the ISO boot and then go straight to the configuration wizard. But just because we want to do a fresh install on the latest version here, and also the version of DNAC has been released pretty aggressively, so the chances are by the time you watch this video, it'll be a different version altogether. And also the chances are it will be a different version from the hardware you receive as well. In which case, then, like I said, download the ISO and then mount it as a virtual device. Okay, you do map to the DVD, point to the ISO, then it is best for you to do this from a machine that's local to the server, so that way everything is being transferred on the high-speed LAN, as opposed to doing it over across the internet, VPN, or on the WAN. Let's go find that file right here, 114, map drive, and then we can go ahead and power on the system. Give it some time to come up. Then what we're going to do is to wait for the boot option, and then we're going to get into boot option by hitting F6, I believe, and that will take us to selecting the source to boot from, which will be our virtual DVD. Right here, get ready, and hit F6. Then it will show entering boot selection menu. All right, then you go down the list until you select Cisco vKVM mapped vDVD. Hit enter, and that's going to make the server boot from the ISO we mounted. Right, we want the first option, the installer. Hit enter, and now the server is going to start prepping for installation. I want to make sure that it starts, because I know this process is going to take a few minutes. Once we get that ball rolling, then I'll do a quick pause in the video until we hit the start of the wizard. There you go. starting. So let me go ahead and maximize this so you can see a bigger screen. I'm going to let this run until we hit the wizard, so let me go ahead and pause the video. Alright, so once you get to the start of the configuration wizard, you have two options to start a new DNAC cluster or to join an existing cluster. Obviously, this is our first DNAC server. We're going to select Start a DNAC cluster. The next page asks you to configure IP address to the network adapter, referencing here as number 1, but you can see by the name, ENP10S0. Right, if you refer back to the diagram that I had in the last video, each of the interfaces at the back of the server are named differently. This one, if you look at the back of the server, is actually the left-hand port. Right, out of the two 10 gig ports that you have, this one is on the left-hand side. Cisco, per the document, suggests that you use this port for cluster link, but what I have found is that it doesn't really matter. Since it is the first and mandatory interface, as you can see, it doesn't say optional here. I am actually going to use this one for our data. In fact, I'm going to combine the data in the cluster. Although in production, you probably don't want to do that. You want to keep the data in the cluster separate. But here, since we're just dealing with the lab, this is going to be our data and the cluster link. The host IP we say is going to be 33.111. 33.111. Net mask /24, gateway is a .1. Did I say 33? It should be 32. There you go, 32.1. DNS server, 32.40. We're going to need static route, and if you want to designate the link to be used as the cluster link, then you need to check that box. Again, in production, you probably want to leave this box unchecked because you will keep the cluster link separate, but here we are combining the two. Go ahead, click Next or select Next. Then we ask to configure it as an option. You can see now it's optional. So technically there's only one mandatory interface you need to configure other than the CIMC. This one is network adapter number 2, and if you look at this, ENP1S0F0. This is the 1 gig port, port number 1, and I believe this on the left-hand side as well. If you look at the back, the two side-by-side 1 gig port, and typically this is used for the out-of-band management. All right, even though it says that select the cluster link if you want to designate this as a cluster link, but the thing is you probably don't want to use a 1 gig copper for your cluster. In this case, it's going to be out of band management as designated right here. And that goes to VLAN 99, IP 111. DNS server, I don't think it really matters. We're just going to put that in. And by the way, we can't have multiple default gateway. If you do that, it's going to complain that you already have a default gateway, which was tied to the network adapter 1. So this adapter is exclusively local unless you enter static routes. All right, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it local and then hit next. Adapter number 3 is your other 1 gig copper port, right, which is meant to be a spare in case you want to connect to an isolated network. We're not going to use that, but just FYI. So I'm going to go ahead and skip it. And the adapter number 4 is your second 10 gig port, which is the port on the right, ENP9S0. All right, like I said, we're going to skip this because we already designated the first 10 gig port as the cluster link, but in production, you probably want to use this one instead. In which case, enter the IP address mask and select cluster link. All right, click next and then proceed. All right, step 11, maglev cluster details. Right, we said if you're doing a cluster, then you're probably going to want the virtual IP address. If you're doing standalone, then you can probably skip this if this is your only node or server. Since we have a cluster of 3, we're going to provide a virtual IP that will be shared among them, and that will be the primary IP for you to access DNAC. 32.110. Then you provide the account password, Linux password. That's for CLI. I provide the password. And then for the admin passphrase, I believe that's for the GUI. There you go. Specify the passphrase for admin to connect to the web interface. And confirm. All right, for the NTP, it says right here, it's recommended to specify 3 or more and space separated. So why don't I do this? I'll point one to the switch loopback, and then the second one to Windows domain controller. So that way we have 2. Click next, validating NTP server. Looks like the first one was okay. Now it's trying the domain controller. If all went well, then you move on to step number 16, which is advanced settings. And these are the 2 subnets that I told you about, service subnet and cluster service. All right, so these are used internally by DNAC for services networking. The minimum size is /21. For us, we're going to do 96.0/21 and the one after that. So consecutive blocks for subnet is 104 because it's a block of 8 class C plus 8, 104/21. All right, just make sure that these subnets are unique in your network. And I haven't seen a document that talks about sizing these subnets, so I assume that the minimum /21 should be enough for it. Although, obviously, if you can spare a bigger subnet, then do that. Click Next. Make sure it's all okay. If it detects an existing install, then it's going to ask you to confirm because it's going to wipe everything. And hit Proceed. All right, so I know for the fact that this installation will take a really long time, and I guess when we're done, we'll come back and update how long that was. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and when all these are done, we'll come back and we'll continue with our installation. All right, so the install for our DNAC number 1 has completed. It actually took a little bit longer than I expected. And most of the install I've done so far took about 12 hours, and this one, surprisingly, it took, I think, close to 19, but it should be done at this point, and when you're done, you'll be back at the login prompt like this, right? Maclef master 1 login. And by the way, I was able to capture the screenshot for a brief moment. I think it was only show up in like 30 seconds right here. Towards the end of the installation, right, when it's done, you will get to see this guy right here. But if you let it run, you might not get to catch it. Right, so configuration succeeded. In order to access the web interface, you can go to either 32.111 or 99, which is our out-of-band management IP, .111. And that's what the screen looks like. But if you let that run unattended like I did, then the chances are you'll be encountering this login straight away. And just FYI, if you ever need to log into the CLI or PuTTY or SSH into it, the username is not admin, but it's actually Maclef. There you go, MAGLEV, and then the password that you set as part of the Linux password. Okay, and if that's correct, you'll be able to log in. It will list out a quick system stats, the system load, memory usage, number of processes, and the IP addresses that you have assigned to each of the interfaces, as you can see right there. Then you should also be able to ping these IPs. But for us, let's go ahead and try to ping our primary one, which is the 32.111. ping 192.16.32 dot. Oh, looks like I have a numlock turned off. Try that again. There you go. 111. And also, if you had the virtual IP set, like for us is 110, you should be able to ping that as well. All right. Now that the IP is pingable, we should be able to access the web interface. So let's bring up. I found Chrome has worked the best with DNAC, so that's what I'm going to use. I think I tried the Firefox, the page doesn't even load, so I'm not going to go there. Right, with Chrome, and try the IP address, HTTPS 32.110, which is the VIP, although just to show you there, you can also hit the individual node IP, right, 111. And you end up on the same server as since we only have one server running right now. Right, we're just gonna go ahead and use our virtual IP. For the username, GUI is admin, and then password is the password that you set during the wizard. Go ahead, click login. And the first thing you're going to be asked to do is to change the password. Right, if you wish to do so, you can enter the old password and then followed by the new password twice. But if you want to just keep what you already have, then you can simply click skip. Then you're asked to provide your CCO credential, and DNAC will use CCO account for a number of things. One is to check for software download as well as fetching the software images. Later on, we'll deal with the software management lifecycle. And also it will use that same, or it can although be different, CCO for smart licensing. Right? If you happen to use the same CCO for both, then that's all you need to enter. Right? For us, we're going to go ahead and enter those credentials. Then click next. Obviously, the DNAC needs to have internet access for it to be able to check the validity of your credential. It's just going to take a couple seconds here, and if the check works out, then you'll be presented with the next step, which is entering your IP address manager, or IPAM. Right, if you have one of those servers, you can go ahead and enter your server name, the URL, and then username and password to log into that. And currently the two supported vendors are Infoblox and BlueCat. We do not have that in our lab, so we're going to go ahead and skip. Then review in terms and conditions. Once you're satisfied, go ahead and click next. And that's the last step. You can go ahead and click go. And then you'll be immediately taken into the landing page of the DNA Center. Right here, where you see a bunch of menus, which we'll go through in the next video. But for now, we're still not quite done with our installations. So what we want to do here is to go to the system settings and what you might want to check. First thing is to see the IP address of the data interface. Right here, 32.111, as well as the number of services that's run. Okay, sometimes if you happens to log in too fast into the web GUI and all the services are not up and running yet, then you might find yourself not being able to access certain sections of the GUI. But usually what I've seen so far, that when the system is fully up and running, you can expect to see the services in the number around 82 or 83. All right, so right here, 82 I believe is the minimum I've seen, at least on this current version of code, 114. So 83 we should be good there. All right, so at this point our DNAC1 is fully up and running, and we are ready to go ahead and install our second DNAC, which is DNAC number 2. Let's refer back to the diagram. I think I closed down the diagram right there. So we're done with DNAC1. Next up is DNAC2. The step's going to be very similar. All right, let me go back. I already have the CAMC for DNAC2 open, and in fact, I already pulled up the KVM console for that. As you can see right here, DNAC2 CMC KVM console, and currently we are sitting at the beginning of the configuration wizard, right? So we went through the same thing where we set the virtual media pointing to our ISO, boot up the server, right, and then force it to boot from the virtual DVD, right after the mounting of the DVD, and then waiting a few minutes, you get to this point right here. Let's go ahead and join this guy to the cluster. Obviously, this is not a start of a cluster anymore. It's a second node, so we're going to join it to DNAC cluster. All right, select join DNAC cluster. Host IP address 172.1632.112. And this is the first 10 gig interface, which is our data interface. /24. Gateway is the same. DNS server 32.40. This is going to be a cluster link. Select next. Moving on to our out-of-band 1 gig interface, 99.112 /24. Actually, no gateway IP address, because you can allow to have one. We can put the DNS, nothing else. Click next. We're not doing adapter 3 or adapter 4, so we're going to skip both. Again, adapter 3 is your second 1 gig interface, and adapter 4 is your second 10 gig interface. Proceed. Since we select to join DNAC to the cluster, we need to specify the master node IP address, and for us, it's our DNAC 1 IP address, which is 32.111. Right, that needs a username to log into the node, not admin, but maclef, which is your Linux root user. Maclef right there. And the password that you set on DNAC1 for that user. All right, so pay attention. What you're about to see next is the node we're trying to make contact to DNAC1. Right there, you can see port 2222. Yep, registering with master node .111 on port 2222. So hopefully you don't have any kind of firewalls that sit between the two nodes. If you do, then you need to allow that port, TCP 2222. All right, then once again, set your Linux password. Note that you don't need to set your admin password because it will automatically inherit that from the master node. Click next. NTP, same thing, 010 and 32.40. And next. And when you're ready, you can hit proceed. And this node should be on its way for the installation. We still have one more node left to join the cluster, which is our DNAC number 3. Cisco actually recommends you to add additional node one at a time. So we basically would need to wait for our second node to be done adding before we can actually start the third node. All right, so I guess we'll see if this guy once again is going to take as long as the 19 hours like it did in the first node, so we can see if that's going to be consistent or not. All right, once again, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and we'll come back when this guy is done installing. All right, our second server has also been installed. This particular server took about, I would say, 11, 12 hours, which is more like what I've seen in the past. And you can see right here, we are also at the login prompt. So let's go ahead and log in with the Linux password, and we should be seeing the IP addresses just like the other one, 32.112, 99.112, right there, and you should also be able to ping that. There you go, 32.112. For some reason, it can't seem to get to the web interface of that server though. I've tried it. We'll wait until we bring up the third node and then we'll try it on that one too. Maybe it's just a quick reboot will fix it. But anyway, if you go and look at the DNA Center, log in, using the virtual IP, go to the system setting, which is where we check on the number of services when we were done installing the first server. And now you should be able to see the second server join the cluster. Right there, 32.112, the status is deploy. Although there's only one service is running though, and when you click into that, the service name is agent. All right, so what's left for us to do right now is to bring up the third and final node in the cluster. You can see right there. In order to enable the high availability, it requires the installation of minimum of 3 DNA Center hosts. Let's go ahead and finish this off. And I already have the DNAC number 3. Looks like I misspelled the host name there. That's okay. All right, same deal. You've seen this already. So we're going to go through this fairly quickly. It's like a third time you see this now, the second time to join, but the third time to configure the whole thing. So once again, select the second option, which is to join the host to the cluster. IP address. Bring back the diagram. The third node, the IP is .113 right there, and the outer band is also 99.113. 32.113, 255, 255, 2550, gateway 32.1, DNS 32.40. This is the first 10 gig. We'll make a cluster link. Next, outer band 99.113 /24, no gateway, DNS server. Then we skip the next 2 adapter, the second 1 gig, and then the second 10 gig. Go ahead, proceed. Specify the IP address of the master node, 32.111, username, maclef, and the password. Click next, and we should see this node trying to make contact to the master on port 2222, 32.111. If it succeeds, you have to specify the Linux password for this host. Next, and finally, is the NTP server. Okay, it looks correct. Click next, and we're also going to have to wait for this one to finish. Most likely, it's going to take around the same time, 11-12 hours. And then select proceed to kick off the installation. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and we'll come back when our third and final node is done with installation. The third server has also been successfully installed, and this one also took roughly about 12 hours, so that seems to be the average time that would take to install a DNAC appliance. Anyway, we're back to the login prompt on our DNAC number 3. And now that we have all of our 3 servers up and running, if you log into the DNAC web interface, you should be able to see all 3 of them right here. All right, and that's our last one, 32.113. And one thing to notice as well is I trying to access the web interface of 113, it doesn't seem to work, which kind of confirm what happened to our DNAC number 2, that we can access the web interface. All right, so maybe that's how it's supposed to be. And coming back to here, you can see that most of the services are running on the master server, while the other 2 servers only have either 1 or 2 services. And this one we looked at earlier, It was the agent service. Let's take a look at this one real quick. This one has the same agent and also another service called broker agent. And now that we have all of the 3 servers, one thing that you notice is that we have an ability to enable high availability. Although the HA feature is still noted as a beta feature in this release, it's 1.14 right now. And this would only appear once you have all 3 nodes up in the cluster. Right, if you rewind the video, you see that this switch right here wasn't there earlier when we had 1 or 2 nodes. What this will do if you switch this on is that it's going to start distributing the services across all 3 nodes, as opposed to how it is right now where the majority of the services is running on node number 1. But to be honest with you, I've tried this a couple times in the previous version and haven't really seen it work very well. And that might as well be because it's still in the beta version. But since this is the first time I'm doing install on the latest version 1.14, I'm probably going to give this another try just to see what happened and also show you guys as well so that way you guys can see what to expect when you try to do this yourself, or maybe even before you try to do it yourself. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to switch this guy from off to on, high availability. We get a little warning message saying that it would take up to an hour to fully distribute DNA center data and services across these hosts, and during this period of time, we'll not be able to use the DNAC to do anything. Right, do you want to proceed? Go ahead, click OK, and we're just going to have to let it run. Maybe let me see if I can try to do a quick refresh just to see if we can notice any changes already. Yep, and you can see that the number of services on the DNAC number 1 has gone down from 83 to 79, while the other 2 number of services has gone up for the second node from 1 to 5, and the third node is from 2 to 5. Right, and there's a little warning message in the bottom right. Services are currently being scaled up and down and trying to request later. So just going to let it does its thing here, and we'll come back and check maybe in a few hours. All right, so we're back. After we switched on the high availability, I kind of left this run for a whole day just to make sure that all the services fully come up, even though in the warning message earlier it said that it should have only take just over an hour, right? But I just wanted to be sure. The high availability switched is at the on state, and the status of the cluster is also shown as synchronized. You can even hit the GUI of the server number 2 and 3 now, as you can see, 32.112. The login page will load, and then 32.113, and that login page loads as well. The services are now distributed between the 3 servers, and if things went correctly, hopefully the total number of services that you see here would exceed the 82 or 83 services that we saw earlier when they were all on server 1. All right, so we have the server 1 running 23 services, server 2 fully deployed running 40, and server 3 is running 27. So at this point, our DNAC cluster is highly available. That's basically what I want to show you after the high availability being switched on. Alright, although you might not have realized how long it took to install our DNAC cluster here, just because I've been trying to save you times by pausing the recording, but this recording was actually done over the course of multiple days as I try to give it ample times between each node install to make sure that all the services comes up. Realistically, you're probably looking at 12 hours per node, so make sure to give yourself enough time, as you don't want to force yourself to continue when things are not completely in an up state. And it also might not be a bad idea to make notes of the number of services when you are done with installation, so you know if any of the services are missing in the future maintenance. And that wraps up our video on SDA DNAC installation. The next video, we will begin our DNAC configuration. You can visit our website to view an extensive list of our lab videos and sign up to get access to additional lab contents. Thank you for watching LabMates.com, and I'll see you guys in the next video.